in general, when we have to figure out where the borders of countries are, there are three legal ways we do this. The easiest way is by treaty, by agreement. Countries on both sides of the border agree, they put it down in a piece of paper, a treaty, and then we know where the borders are. Israel actually has border treaties with two of its neighbors, with Egypt and with Jordan, and so we're okay on those fronts. It does not have a border agreement with the Palestinians. It does not have a border agreement with Syria. It does not have a border agreement with Lebanon. So now we look to the next way in which we do things. The next way that we can determine borders is by what's called effectivité. It means essentially long-standing possession that looks like a state is governing it and that is treated that way by others. Now, in the case of Israel, it's certain that Israel has had long-standing possession of the West Bank, for example, and the Golan Heights, but it's not treated by others as being tantamount to sovereignty. It's not clear in the case of the West Bank that Israel's been treating it as a sovereign power, and so it's hard to see out of effectivité that we have a clear statement of borders. And this brings us to the final way in which borders are usually determined, and this is the way they're usually determined for new states. And it's a Latin doctrine, and please excuse me for the Latin, and if I'm mispronouncing it, I hope the Latin scholars will forgive me. But I believe it's called uti possidetis juris, or if you have difficulty with it, let's just call it UPJ. And this doctrine states that when a new state is created, it inherits the borders, even if it didn't inherit the legal personality, by the way, it inherits the borders of the administrative unit that preceded it. So let me give you some examples. There was a mandate in Africa called Urundi and Rwanda. Urundi and Rwanda became two independent states, one the independent state of Rwanda, one the independent state of Burundi. And there had to be a determination of what's the border between them. Well, as it happened, within Urundi and Rwanda, there was an administrative boundary between the Urundi district and the Rwanda district. That administrative boundary became the boundary of the state. The Soviet Union split apart. It was comprised of 15 republics. The administrative boundaries of the republics were never international boundaries. These were not independent states for the most part. Kazakhstan was not a state. It was simply a part of the Soviet Union. But Kazakhstan had a border within the Soviet Union of the Kazakh Soviet Socialist Republic. That became the border of the new state of Kazakhstan. This uti possidetis juris was the rule that was used in Yugoslavia to figure out the borders of the new states of Serbia and Croatia and Bosnia and the rest. It is the doctrine that has been used all over Africa, Rwanda, Burundi, Mali, Burkina Faso. It's been used in Latin America, and it's the rule that was used by the International Court of Justice in many, many cases to resolve what are the boundaries of new states. In fact, I'm not aware of any competing doctrine out there. When you have a new state, the rule we use is uti possidetis juris, or UPJ. Now, what does that rule tell us about the boundaries of Israel? Israel was preceded by the British Mandate of Palestine. Israel is the only state that emerged from that mandate. And so uti possidetis juris tells us that the boundaries of Israel, that Israel inherited all the territory of the British Mandate of Palestine. According to that doctrine, then, Israel inherited sovereignty over the West Bank, over East Jerusalem, notwithstanding the fact that those were conquered by Jordan in 1948. It inherited sovereignty over the Gaza Strip, notwithstanding the fact that that was conquered by Egypt in 1948. Transjordan was part of the mandate, although Transjordan was, not only was there an administrative boundary between Transjordan and the rest of the Palestine Mandate, Transjordan was granted independence as a separate state in 1946. Now, what were the borders of Transjordan in 1946 when it became an independent state? It was the administrative boundary between the Transjordan part of the mandate and the rest of the mandate. And so Uti Possidetis Juris was the foundation of the boundary of the new state of Transjordan as well.